Hey, welcome. It is Wendy Robbins, producer of The Marijuana Show, along with Karen Paul. This is Bud Camp. Welcome. Basically, it's like Mentor Box for the cannabis industry. We go through the medical, understanding the health, CBD, things like that. We also do investor and entrepreneur conversations. Today, we are going to talk about medical cannabis and CBD clinical research. And so the very first question that I have is, what kind of clinical research is allowed in the United States for medical cannabis?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Wendy. I was very much looking forward to speaking with you today. There's various forms of clinical research that is allowed to occur in the United States, meaning that it does not always have to be FDA endorsed, that you've actually pursued an investigational new drug application. A lot of research that's being performed in the US is based on an IRB that's actually approved the research for particular protocols. So there's protocols that are currently ongoing in epilepsy, autism, fibromyalgia, pain. I know that Sue Sicily is doing a lot of work in Arizona right now with veterans. In particular, I happen to know Sue. She's one of my favorite people. But basically, as long as you're working through an IRB who provides you with the approval, you're able to run your clinical research from an observational standpoint. So the physicians are not providing the medical cannabis or the CBD to the patients directly. That's the job based on the state that you're in that comes out of that dispensary. But the physician, from an observational standpoint, can perform those duties.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So what kind of research is Israel doing right now?
Israel, they're ahead of the game. They're doing a lot of research over there. We're seeing a lot of things coming out from fibromyalgia to autism to palliative care for cancer, even looking at tumor regression as it relates to cancer. They're definitely ahead with respect to research. Luckily, now some of those companies that started in Israel are coming over to the U.S. and are starting to run research in the United States to see whether or not the product that they've been running over in Israel is actually effective here in the U.S.
Yeah, there's some really, really good work being done for sure. So my next question is, how can a patient become an advocate and educate doctors and nurses about cannabis and CBD?
That's a good question. Thank you for asking me that, because I do have a nonprofit that's called Affinity Patient Advocacy, and I originally founded that company to help provide advocates to patients who have cancer at no cost as a result of my father's passing from cancer, from stage 4 liver, lung, and stomach cancers. As I've gotten into the medical cannabis and CBD industry, I have found that the skill set from APA, Affinity Patient Advocacy, was very relevant to what we're doing today in the medical cannabis space. So one of the things that if we're not helping a patient from an advocate standpoint, what I try to do is, when I'm speaking or helping people, is that it's really important to understand medical cannabis and CBD as far as how it may help you as a patient. There's a lot of periodicals that are out there that are public. If you look on the New England Journal of Medicine, you'll be able to pull up a ton of publications that are regarding either CBD or medical cannabis. There's another website called PubMed that, again, will have periodicals and publications relative to potentially your indication that you can use as proof that, hey, this is working. Further, I'm always happy to get on a call with a physician. I'm not an MD, of course, but from a clinical standpoint, because I'm in operations, I'm able to carefully articulate what we've been seeing in the industry, what we see happening, to try and help the patients. But the better informed they are when they're going to their medical cannabis physician, or not even their medical cannabis, just their regular general practitioner, the better it will be for them.
I agree with that. Very good point to go to pubmed.org, check it out, and then come prepared to show your doctor, your nurse, the findings, so that way they can do the research. That makes a lot of sense to me. There's also some great videos that you can look at, but be prepared to talk to your doctor ahead of time. So how can a patient become an advocate and educate doctors? Oh, sorry about that. Just asked you that. What's the most interesting things you're finding out about CBD and cannabis?
You know, the one of the really cool things that I've been really very fortunate to experience with respect to the medical cannabis CBD industry is that we're seeing, as we're running clinical research, that the primary indication, we'll just pick on fibromyalgia, for example. With fibromyalgia, if we're designing a protocol, we're also going to look for secondary endpoints. What that means is that there are things that's conditionally based to the disease. So anxiety is a great example of something that happens to a patient who has fibromyalgia. I mean, this is common sense. The person is in pain all the time. Sometimes they're depressed. They can't get out of bed. They can't function in the capacity that they used to be prior to being diagnosed with fibromyalgia. So our ability when we're designing studies specifically is that we're able to look ahead and say, okay, let's look at anxiety. Let's look at sleep. Are their sleep habits improved based on taking the CBD and or medical cannabis, whatever it is that's being prescribed to the patients? So what I've been finding is, as a result, we're seeing other things occur. Like, for example, if someone has an autoimmune disease along with the primary indication, the primary problem that they're taking the medical cannabis for, we're seeing there's been some improvements with the autoimmune setting. Again, not making claims, just saying these are things that we're observing. They further need to be studied, but it's been pretty remarkable what we've been seeing overall.
Totally. All right. So what are some of the most interesting things coming out about cancer and epilepsy and CBD from a clinical research perspective?
That's a great question. So from a cancer perspective, we're seeing a great increase in palliative care support. So as you know, in traditional palliative care support, meaning non-CBD or medical cannabis, many times the patients are prescribed opiates, say, for pain. In this instance, with the access to medical cannabis or CBD, they're able to actually receive treatment for their pain through the medical cannabis or CBD. Not only the pain factor, but the nausea, the appetite, because a lot of times people who are suffering from cancer, they don't have an appetite, and it's understandable, right? The anxiety factor is becoming minimized because they're not so anxious, because the cannabis or the CBD is also working on the anxiety effects that they're having. With respect to epilepsy, some of the products that I've been researching, and one in particular that is with one of my clients that I obviously can't say yet because it's in developmental stages, we have seen with those patients that are epilepsy patients that their EEG from when they, prior to starting the cannabis or CBD to when they've taken it for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, there's been a huge amount of increase as far as how they function as a person, right? They're not have as much anxiety. Their seizures are going down, but if they're on the product long enough, they're able to see that the EEG does not look anywhere near what it did when they first started, meaning some of these patients don't even look like they were epileptic anymore.
Huge. It's huge. Well, I mean, that leads me to, you've got GW Pharma now being able to get approved through the FDA. So we're going to see CBD, obviously, they're going to have to rethink that and make it legal, no duh. And that's really exciting. So are you finding that traditional biotech and big pharma are interested in cannabis and CBD? And when do you see big pharma stepping in?
Yeah, so I definitely see that traditional biotech is interested, right? I still work in both sectors of the industry. I have traditional clients, and that's where I came out of. I came out of traditional, and I feel fortunate in the sense that I've been able to bring those skill sets forward to the medical cannabis CBD industry. However, I see some companies that are interested in it, and then I see some people that are afraid because it's still considered a Schedule I, so they get very nervous about how to interact within that research frame of mind. The other thing is that a lot of these professionals that are colleagues of mine that I have a high amount of respect for, they don't understand how to recruit the patients properly because they think they can just roll out a patient recruitment plan like they would do from a traditional standpoint. That's not how it works. You have to understand the eco-life science factor of medical cannabis and CBD as to all of the regulatory statutes that you have to follow under that law that is for that state. So let's just pick on Pennsylvania, for example, because my main headquarters is in Pennsylvania and I have an office in California. But in Pennsylvania, the patients have to have a medical card. It's not recreationally approved, so it means it's just medically, as you know. So they have to have the medical card in order to be even a participant to the study. However, in Pennsylvania, we have 21 qualifying conditions. So that means there's 21 disease states that a patient must have in order to get a card. So that narrows down your funnel with respect to finding those patients. So if I was trying to find patients for fibromyalgia, I don't know how many patients registered with respect to fibromyalgia in Pennsylvania. So I have to have relationships with all of the dispensaries that are nearby where the treating physicians are that are participating in the study to be able to find my patients. Traditional biotech, you don't do that. You just release out that you're enrolling the study. Do you fall between this inclusion, exclusion criteria? And patients are recruited in a very organic fashion. In the medical cannabis CBD space, that's not the case right now. I hope we get to a point where this isn't a problem, but I see that there's some hesitancy in big pharma here based on the fact that it's a Schedule I, but then you'll see, for example, Novartis, where they had a sub-company within the Novartis family enter into an agreement with a very large Canadian medical cannabis biotech company. So they're starting to dip their toe in the pond to see kind of pressure tests. But, I don't see this really happening for the next couple of years where big pharma is going to come in and swipe in.
Well, I want to thank you very much. To me, that's good that big pharma is staying away for a little bit. I think that leaving it organic makes sense, but the fact that GW is in means the big pharma is going to be in. They're all circling around. I know that. And if they start going into Canada, that's just going to start bringing them to the United States when it's not federally illegal. So I want to thank you very much for being on the call and teaching us so much today. And thank you again. Bye for right now. Thank you.